Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I'm going to start with a question that might be like a little bit high level. And so I want you to contemplate the answer before you jump in. And the question is really, how empowered do you feel right now? There's so many things going on where people want to tell us how to think. People want to tell us how to be, act. It's like it's so weird in today's world how our freedoms have kind of shifted, and it's so easy to blame other people. And so I found somebody that I want to unpack this with today that's going to help us to be able to take charge of our destiny. We're going to talk about making some positive choices. We're going to talk about taking action to advance. And so hopefully at the end of this podcast, you will not feel disempowered, if that's a word. I love making up words. I want you to feel empowered. And so does today's guest. And it's Christian de la Huerta. How are you today, sir?
Hey, Dave, I'm doing great. Thanks for much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. President of Soulful Power, TEDx speaker, author of Awakening the Soul of Power. So holy cow, there's a lot going on over there. So fill us in on what Soulful Power is.
Well, you framed it beautifully in the beginning with your opening question, because most of us, I think, feel disempowered. There's so much in our world today that we absolutely can do nothing about. And critical challenges that we're all facing as a species. And so we also have a conflicted relationship to power. Like part of us wants it, part of us is afraid of it. And I think what we fear, that if we really stepped into all of who we are, into all our power, if we owned it, that other people wouldn't be able to handle it, and that we might end up rejected and alone. And who wants that? Then add to that the fear that we think we might abuse it. And no wonder. How many abuses of power have we witnessed? And all you got to do any given day, turn on the news to witness at least one.
Right.
And then we've also been conditioned to believe that power is a bad thing, that power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely, they tell us. What they didn't tell us, though, is that quote was speaking specifically, Lord Acton was speaking specifically about political power, not personal power. And so when you add to the mix the fact that we've also been conditioned to believe that the emotions are negative, we hate conflict, we avoid confrontation. What happens is we end up giving away, we end up selling out on our power, on our personal power, our innate, inherent power that nobody can give to us, nobody can take away. We are the only ones who give it away. And Dave, as you know, we do so for kind of sad and lame reasons. We say yes when inside we feel no, for an illusion of security. We stuff ourselves into small little packages so as to not rock the boat so much, not rock the boat too much, for a false sense of acceptance, for morsels of pseudo love. And so not a good strategy. So the book talks about how do we step into power, our own power, in a way that's not about hierarchy, control, fear, force, manipulation, domination. How do we step into power in a way that doesn't require that we push anybody else down in order for us to feel powerful?
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And you bring up these words that are so like scary, like control. Like number one, we don't want to give up control, which I get. But then secondly, we don't want to be a control freak because we've been, that's a negative. So like, how in the world do you navigate words like that, or conflict or power? Like you said, we're so busy on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, been for most of your life, and entrepreneurs listening, we're just dialed in to move our business forward. We're just trying to move it forward. And now all of a sudden, I'm supposed to be, thinking in a different perspective, or being a little more self-aware, are the words that I like to use. So, how do we do that? How do we, have this relationship with our company where we want to move it forward, where we're in control of our own destiny, but yet, we don't want to take it too far where we actually do, like you said, hurt other people. How do you find that balance there?
That's a great question, Dave. And I think you're right. I think the first step is self-awareness, because we can't do anything about what we don't see, but we're not aware of. And the sad thing is that we're being ruled, we're being influenced, impacted from stuff that happened to us when we were kids, stuff that we've been conditioned by society. And we're not even aware of it. So we're being run by our subconscious and making choices that we don't even know why we make choices, believing stuff that we've never questioned why we believe certain things and why we do the things we do. So the first step, as far as I'm concerned, to not only for like real success, but for in our businesses as entrepreneurs, but to have a sense of personal freedom, and to live in a conscious way, with clear choices rather than just reacting to other people's judgments or what society thinks we should be or do. It's we got to first step is becoming aware of that. Why do we do the things we do? So any practice that we can come up with to get better at that kind of stuff, I would recommend. So, for example, one of them is there's a lot of research now on EQ and emotional intelligence,
right?
As part of the effective tools of really good leaders in the 21st century. 30 years ago, when I first started doing this work, I couldn't tell you what I was feeling because I had no idea what I was feeling. And by the way, my father was a psychiatrist, so and my degrees in psychology, I should have known. But I couldn't tell you. So what I did, like, here's a simple practice. Pull a list of emotions and kind of educate yourself a little bit. Like, all it takes is a sentence or two as to what the emotion is. And so I would walk around. This is before iPhone. So I had a Radio Shack timer in my pocket, and that set it off for the hour. And it'd go off at the hour. Then I look at my grid of emotions and I'd say, am I feeling that? Am I feeling that? Am I feeling that? Huh, maybe. And so after a couple of weeks of doing that, I was so much more intelligent and aware about my emotions, which makes all sorts of difference in all sorts of relationships, whether personal or professional.
Yeah. Well, the statistics show on that, Christian, that like 2 out of 3 people can identify the emotion that they're in at that moment, but yet they're guided by them. So I think it's really amazing. We do a lot of work with EQ as well, and you take that assessment and people just really look at you. If they look at you with that blank stare, you already know that we got a lot of work to do, right? But I think it's interesting, your first step of personal freedom. So I'm going to, turn it totally personal to me because I became a business owner years and years ago for one of the reasons was that personal freedom. Now, my challenge is if I stop in the middle of the day and do a task that is non-business related, like, I don't know why 8 to 5 is my brain. Like you said, we do things we don't even understand why, right? I'm just conditioned in my mind to be 8 to 5. Well, here's the two complications on there. Number one, in Central Time, that is different than Pacific. So I have 2 different locations that I work out of. So when I'm in San Diego and I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's already 7 o'clock in Wisconsin. So I'm already like feeling I'm behind. So this personal freedom thing there is weird. But the second part is, like I said, middle of the day, Christian, I go and do something that's non-work related. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I start to feel guilty. And it's like, where does that come from? So any advice or feedback from you, I'd love to learn for myself.
Well, I think you named it. It is just conditioning. And, stuff that we've taken on from generation after generation, or from our parents and the way they were raised and their parents before them and they were raised. And, that's part of the process of liberating ourselves, is we get to choose. We get to choose everything, not only what we want to do with our lives, but what runs inside of our heads. We don't have to believe something just because it's the way that it's always been said, done, or said. It's like we get to question everything and then land on conscious reasons as to why we value something or decide to not to value it.
So if I have that happen right there, so again, I'm just going to use me because I'm sitting here, and if something non-work related I do, and I start to do it, and then I have that thought of, why are you doing this? Get back to work, whatever. That's the thought that I should challenge and say, like, why are you thinking this? is it coming from a healthy place? I mean,
Exactly.
that's so, and that's what I want to encourage the listeners to do, because I'm sure I'm not the only one. Maybe it's reverse for you. At 5 o'clock, you're like, I should really go home, but my business is, causing me to stay or whatever. And if you're making those unhealthy choices or unhealthy, movement, I just want to encourage you to challenge it. Like Christian said, what do I do once I challenge it? Because I think I might be, like nervous of what the answer is going to be. What do I do next?
I mean, if I don't know about you, but my experience as an entrepreneur is that I work way more as an entrepreneur than I did when I worked for somebody else, for a corporation.
Yep. Yep.
It's so, and it's stuff that I would do. I mean, it's like, I love what I do. I feel like really blessed that I get to do what I do, that the work that I do really makes a difference in real human lives. So it's what, if somebody asked me, well, what would you do if you won like a big lotto? And I guess buying a ticket would help.
Yeah. Exactly.
But I would do exactly what I'm doing now. I would just do it on a much bigger scale with a lot more support, a team of people, more of a team of people to help me. So I think we can be kind with ourselves. We can, we've got this word self-care has gotten a bad rap.
Yeah.
Because we think it's selfish. Whereas to me, self-care is not selfish. Self-care is mandatory.
Sure.
And if self-care means that we take an hour in the middle of the day to go do whatever errand we need to run, or just to, I don't know, get a massage, go for a sit go for a beautiful walk in nature just to center ourselves.
Sure.
That's part of what we do. And because what happens if we don't take care of self, if we just work, do, give, what happens? We know we burn out, and then we start resenting what we're doing because we're burnt out, and then we don't take personal responsibility for that. We blame others. Sure. Because we give, and we're not receiving in return. Well, it's our responsibility because we're not valuing ourselves. Yeah. And so part of that process of taking care of self, to me, is mandatory. It's the opposite of selfish.
Wow. And I think that interesting that you bring that up, because anybody that's ever flown has heard the comment of put your mask on first, right?
Exactly.
And I kind of was like, at first, when I started to really kind of think about it, it's like, well, my gosh, if I had a little kid with me, I would want to make sure that they're safe first, and then you start thinking about it, and it's like, well, you can't think straight. You can't see. I mean, your faculties are hindered if you don't put your mask on first. So It is really hard, because selfish is the first word that comes to mind, of that kind of philosophy of take care of yourself first. And it's so interesting because even from a biblical perspective, you're supposed to love others as you love yourself. Well, if you don't love yourself, how in the world can you love other people? And I always miss that spot. I just go right to loving other people. It's really easy to love somebody else. It's hard to look at yourself and say, I really like this about me. And I challenge clients that I have, to make sure that they give themselves the grace that they give other people. So how does that fit into the things that you do, Christian?
Well, absolutely. I use that same example of the mask when we fly, because it is sort of counterintuitive at first. But the thing is, like, what we're talking about is like, we got to take care of self so that we can take care of others. Because we can't give what we don't have. And if we've been giving and depleting ourselves, then we don't have anything to give anymore. And then we have to start digging deep. And then that's when we start burning out and depleting ourselves and becoming resentful about it all. So yeah, to me, it's mandatory, especially for those of us who are service oriented, who have a sense of mission, a desire to make a difference in the world. Even more important for us to take care of self.
So is it as simple as, like you said, to invest some time in taking a walk in nature or doing things? I mean, it's one thing to say, Christian, I really need to take better care of myself. Totally get that. It's completely another thing to schedule it on my calendar, to have somebody hold me accountable to it, to literally know what I'm doing, because I got to believe, it would be the first thing on my calendar. If I put on my calendar, I'm going to take a walk for 45 minutes. And I have it on my calendar, and about 3 minutes before I'm getting ready to leave, my cell phone goes off, and it's, oh my gosh, it's my best customer, right? I mean, oh, surely I can push this walk out. I mean, that's what I think happened. At least that's what happens to me. I don't know about the rest of the world. I'm guessing it's something very similar. How in the world do you put the stake in the ground and say, nope, you know what? That call can wait. My self-care is more important than X, whatever X is. How do you help people pass that blind spot?
Well, and you said something that's very wise too. Is like accountability, right? Keeping ourselves accountable is hard to do in the abstract. So having a coaching relationship or a coach to help you do that and to keep us doing what we said we were going to do, it's very helpful. It's helpful for me. To have my business coach to provide a different perspective that may not be the first thing I think of.
Sure.
And so, and that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur. We get to make up our lives. We get to create our days in a way that works for us. And part of that self-care is getting clear about what works for us, what doesn't work for us. So developing healthy boundaries with other people, with employees, even with vendors. And so what does it take for us to make it work? For me, it means getting up earlier, which I kind of do naturally anyway, and get that kind of stuff done first, whether it's my morning practice, my meditation, going for a walk, get that out of the way first before I get in the computer, and that's it.
Sure. Yep.
The day's gone.
Yep. Wow. Well, I tell you what, you had everybody until you used those two words that now half of our audience left, and that's healthy boundaries. Because, we as entrepreneurs, we struggle with, at least I do, I struggle with boundaries because, again, like you said, we're in a service-oriented business, and I don't want to use boundaries as a reason not to service my customers. So then I think black or white, and I'm working on trying to get more gray in my life. I think black or white. I think either I'm going to help my customer, or if he goes into voicemail, I'm not helping him. So it's really hard. It's always been hard in my career, to put the phone down and not answer a question or not respond immediately to that email. I'm glad that, like, in our time here, I'm not like wondering, oh my gosh, I got an email. I got to pause this right. And I got to answer it. I'm glad I don't have it to that extreme. It does affect my personal life. It affects, routine things that I like to do. So I'm just looking at it, trying to help the person listening. How do you get out of that routine? How do you get out of that? How do you make yourself more aware that you have those issues? Is an outside influence usually the best place for you?
Well, and even I think we go back to what we were saying before, and you mentioned the word again, is aware. Right? Like start paying attention to the patterns. Like, what does our day look like? Because once I turn that computer on, that's it.
Yeah.
That's for me. It's like one email after the next is like, and then the day's gone.
Yep.
From one phone call, one Zoom session. It's
sure. Yep.
So I know enough about myself and how I work to know that I need to carve out time. If I'm going to do more creative work, like, working on the book, writing content, creating a video, I need to carve out time for that. Otherwise, I become reactive to all those phone calls and all those emails and all those Zoom sessions. And I end up doing what we all do, doing what's immediate rather than what's important. So that's another good practice for me is to get clear in the morning as I'm looking at my to-dos, is like, all right, what's critically important? Sure. What do I need to focus on first so that I make sure I get that done above anything else?
Wow. And I remember Dwight Eisenhower created the Eisenhower matrix that talks about urgent and important. And I think that I try and help my clients answer, when a task comes across your desk or when something comes across, is it important? Is it urgent? Those are really critical questions, because we're not trained to necessarily have a really good way to prioritize. Plenty of people I know, again, they just, like right now, if my phone rang, how rude would that be if I said, oh my gosh, Christian, hold on, I got to grab that. There are people that struggle with that type of stuff. So hopefully listeners today and viewers today are able to prioritize. And again, we try and bring little tips that are just able to help you in your journey along the way. And Christian talked about EQ and emotional intelligence as being a really important spot for us. If you can't identify your emotion that you're in right now, like I'm thinking about it right now and I'm like, what emotion do I have? And I don't know what the right words are. I mean, I'm excited to be learning from you. I'm happy that you jumped on the call, so I'm joy might be the right word depending on what school you're from. What right now, if you can share with the audience, what emotion are you going through right now, Christian?
Right this moment, I'm calm and relaxed. I have a certain level of excitement and stimulation because of the interesting conversation we're having. And so there's a certain, stimulation. I feel vibrating and alive inside. And so, another great technique that given what we're talking about is meditation, right? Even if you take 5 minutes a day, and there's so much evidence, so much like research on the benefits of meditation, and which connects to self-care, because sometimes we have to slow down in order to speed up. Mm-hmm. So if we take 5 minutes, that 10 minutes, it will and we do that habitually, even start 3 days a week. It'll change your life, and it'll change your physiology. It'll change your inner state of being, and it'll change your relationship. Because one of the things that do, like most of the time when we meditate, it's going to be boring, right? We're sitting there counting our breaths or repeating a mantra or something like that. Pretty boring. Once in a while, you have this great, amazing, experience of no mind and inner peace and all that kind of stuff. But even if you're not, there's great benefit in doing that.
Okay.
Because what we're doing when we're observing ourselves, right? So it goes back to that self-awareness. Mm-hmm. Like when we're sitting there, we're watching ourselves. Oh, there I go, having a thought about that conversation I need to have with my coworker or my vendor or whatever. Back to the breath. Oh, there it is. I'm doing my shopping list. Yep. Back to the breath. Oh, there it is. I'm rehashing the argument I had with my spouse last night.
Right.
Back to the breath. But so it's work and it's effort, but it doesn't go to waste. That's sort of like you're learning how to dribble so that you eventually can play in a basketball game.
Sure.
Or running a 5K in preparation for a marathon.
Sure.
Because when the rubber hits the road and we're about to get into an argument that it's not going to go well, because we all know we've all gotten stuck in power struggles. We've all been reactive and then regretted something that we said or did. Mm-hmm. That developing that muscle, that self-awareness, oh, there it is. I'm having that emotion. I'm feeling this. When they did that, I felt blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That's the practice so that we can avoid getting sucked into those power struggles and getting sucked into those arguments that never, ever, ever end well. Yeah. Because we'll have that moment of choice. That's all that we're going for here is the moment of choice. Wait a minute, that hurt, ouch. How do I want to be? How do I want to respond to the situation in a way that's going to be that I'm going to be able to express myself and be clear about what works for me and what doesn't work for me, and yet without causing harm to the relationship.
And I think we all, as entrepreneurs and business owners, have been in that spot where we've said something we shouldn't have said. And whether it's to a client, whether it's to a competitor, whatever, a teammate, whatever. And the goal here is to really think a little while before you speak. And I think what I took away from what you just said, Christian, is really to understand what triggers that emotion. Exactly. What's the trigger? And that takes a little bit of work and it takes a little bit of practice. And, if you realize that, okay, alcohol might be a trigger for you, that you tend to say things you don't mean. People call it liquid courage, right? Where you'd never say something, right. When you're sober and you have a couple of cocktails and all of a sudden you're, talking a lot more than you would. Maybe that's a trigger that you need to kind of work through. I don't know what the triggers are. Everybody has a different trigger. But I think that's interesting. You also, from a meditation perspective, that's a scary, creepy unknown word for a lot of us, right? And we think of this big grandiose, I got to go on a weekend retreat, and I have it sounds way bigger than it needs to be. So if somebody's listening that's either never done it before, is nervous about it, how do you encourage people, or where do you send people to try and, like, just, I just want to understand a little bit more about it before I jump in. Where would you suggest they go?
Oh my God, there's so many meditation classes now online. Just Google meditation, and it's not a scary thing. It's like, all it is focusing our attention, right? And bringing choice. In doing that, bringing choice back to the equation. So it could be as simple, like I was saying before, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You do 5 minutes 3-4 times a week, it'll change your life.
Wow.
And just sitting yourself, find a quiet space. You sit with your spine straight, your arms and legs uncrossed, and you can just either focus on your breath. Inhale, notice the exhale. You can count your breath if that gives the mind something to do. You can repeat a word. I mean, it doesn't have to be like a Sanskrit mantra. You can just say, I open. You could say, yes. Just it's a way to focus the mind. And that's what, I mean, there have been so many studies where it increases productivity at work. It improves communication. There's less absenteeism. The employees, report higher levels of job satisfaction, and interactions between employees become more positive. Like, this is all studied, like research.
Sure.
And not to mention all the physical and medical benefits of reduction of stress, blood pressure, etc.
Yeah.
Like, how do you quantify inner peace?
Sure.
And the ability to sleep peacefully at night? It's like, wow. And it's just as simple as that. It could be as simple as that.
Wow. That's
and then just add a little bit, after a couple of weeks, make it 10 minutes. And awesome. And the body starts getting trained so that you start desiring that, you start needing that in order to maintain your balance, your inner thing, so that we can go. I'm from the tropics. I'm Cuban American, and raised in Miami for large parts of my life, and so we get the concept of eye of the storm. It's very real for us, and so that's what we're going for, right? So we're the eye of the storm. We can have other people's judgments, expectations, their demands of us. We can allow all the drama of other people and other companies, all the drama that's going on in the world. We can allow it to surround us, to go around us, but we don't have to take it on. We don't have to engage. We don't have to get sucked into their drama.
Wow.
And that way we maintain our center, we maintain our inner peace, we maintain the ability to make a choice rather than react.
That's a really great way to put it. And again, because I'm black or white, I was immediately drawn to the fact of, like, how do I want to say it? Are you denying reality? But, how does reality come in? Because obviously in the eye of the storm, it's peaceful there, but it sure isn't peaceful around, and so how do you kind of like get to the point? Because I sometimes, I feel like it's a denial of what's really going on. And, I know people that they're always okay. There's never a bad day in their life. And it's like, wow, I don't know if it's authentic or if it's or not. So how do you deal with true, if you're not in the eye of the storm and you do have, a bad quarter in sales, or you do lose a serious team member, something vital, or you lose your biggest customer, how do you balance that out with that eye of the storm thought process?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. It's not about denying reality a lot. This is not about becoming Pollyanna or airy-fairy. It's not about denying what is. There's some really dramatic, horrible things happening in the world, and humans do horrible things to each other. So it's not about denying any of that.
Right.
But it's about maintaining our center no matter what's happening around us. And yeah, things are going to happen that are tough, whether it's financial stuff, loss of loved ones, of course. But so we're not talking about denying the emotions. That's we're wanting to honor the emotions. But what happens is that we have the emotions, we don't get stuck in them. Because what happens when we deny emotions, is that we deny and deny and deny sadness, and we try to put on a fake smile. That stuff doesn't go away. What used to be spiritual teaching, that everything is energy, now we know from quantum physics, it's true. Everything is energy. This chair that I'm sitting on, the body, the emotions, it's all energy. Energy cannot be destroyed. It can only change form. So all those emotions that we don't allow ourselves to feel or express, they just don't disappear. They get stuffed. They get stuck in the tissues of our body, and then we go around, with layers upon layers upon layers of unresolved emotional crap. And then here we are trying to have a relationship in the present. Sure. It's all getting filtered through that lifetime of unhealed past trauma and repressed emotions. Yikes. Like, I don't know how any relationships can work, because we haven't been taught how to hold them, how to approach them. And we haven't been taught how to clear ourselves of this cauldron of emotions. So it's, to me, and we've been, again, conditioned, especially men, right? Little boys don't cry. Yeah. Since we were kids, that so we've been conditioned to suppress emotions. So we think that to walk around like these uncaring, unfeeling robots is strength. It's like, wait a minute, this is not strength. Sure. This is like prison. Yep. And there's a price to pay for that, for not feeling emotions. Like, no wonder women outlive men by 5 years in the US, by 7 years globally, because there's a price to pay for those repressed emotions. What happens is we suppress, and then the next unfortunate one says the wrong thing, or says it in the wrong way, and we explode. Yeah. And we cause harm to our relationships. Or we suppress, that stuff has to come out, and then start seeping out and showing up as bodily symptoms. Cancer, heart attacks, ulcers. Wow. So there's no way around it. We've got to learn how to master this. And It all begins with self-awareness.
Sure, absolutely. Wow, that's awesome. One of the words you keep bringing up, and I want to talk about here as we start to land today, is breathing, because it seems like in my research about you, there's a lot of, you talk a lot about breathing. I understand, obviously, we never usually don't think about it throughout a day. So it's nothing that we have to consciously do. I'm just curious, are there some simple things that we can do in our day-to-day activity that will help us in this journey? And what are some of the things that breathing, helps us with? If you can.
That's a great question, Dave. Yeah, it's all about the breath, right? It all begins and ends with the breath, literally. Our most loyal, most companion on this journey of embodiment, of being in a body. And so, and it's at the core of every meditation practice, is at the core of every spiritual practice. And so there are swamis in India that have that much control over their body that they can tell the heart to slow down, and the heart slows down. Some of them can mimic states that are so close to, they're so deeply, deeply relaxed that you can't tell whether they're dead or alive. Most of us aren't there yet.
I dated somebody like that once. I mean, wait a minute here. Was that I dated her? So I'm just kidding. Yeah. To lighten this up a minute. So, wow, that's awesome. Go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah. So most of us will never have that kind of mastery over the body. But any one of us, anybody can slow down the breath. It's not hard. All it takes is the awareness and the choice. Okay. Anybody can slow down the breath. What happens when we slow down the breath? The heart has no choice. The heart has to slow down. And as the heart slows down, that's when we get upset, when we get tense, when we get afraid, that's what's going. The heart's pumping. And then we start releasing all these, all these chemicals into the bloodstream. And so when we slow down the heart reverses that. The body begins to quiet down. The nervous system begins to relax. And then we can make clear choices rather than just reacting from these places of fear or anger or whatever it is that we're reacting from, mostly not even aware of what's going on or why we feel the things we feel or why we do the things we do. And so just a real simple practice. Just slow down your breath. Right.
And how do you, is it just a matter of sitting there, telling yourself to slow your breath down and it happens? I mean, what consciously, it just thinking about it right now, all of a sudden makes me a little like anxious because I'm like, oh my gosh, slow my breath down, and then I have to take a breath just to make sure I got breath. So I'm just curious for myself. I'm sure no one else has got the question, but I'm just curious.
it's the kind of thing that it's not hard. It just takes a little bit of practice, awareness.
Okay.
And you're totally right. It's a good thing that we don't have to remember to breathe, because most of us would forget.
Exactly.
So we take it for granted.
Sure.
But all it is paying a little bit of attention.
Okay.
Right. And so you're in traffic and you're stuck in traffic, which is going to make you late for that meeting. What good is it for you to get all upset?
Yeah.
And start banging the floor and hitting the horn? It's like, it's not going to make one bit of difference.
Yeah.
The only thing that we're paying is our bile is being released into our system. We're eating ourselves up from the inside out. So much easier, just take a breath.
Sure.
Take a few breaths, slow down your breath.
Gotcha.
Start with a count of 4. Count slow, 4 seconds on the inhale, 4 seconds on the inhale, and stretch it out. Turn it into a game.
Wow, that's cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. What as we wind down today, what's Christian's tip of the week? What would that be for people listening?
Well, I think we've touched on a lot of that. I say use the breath, like use your breath, and begin to develop a relationship with your breath. It'll change your life. And that there's a way that we can step into power that doesn't require that we be corrupted, that we abuse it. That has nothing to do with putting people down or stepping on them, and that there's a way that we can come to such a level of self-awareness, which leads to self-acceptance, which leads to self-love. Mm. And so rather than going through life like most of us have, like our sense of who we are, our level of self-acceptance is externally based. What feedback we get from others. So we're always going to be dependent on external validation. It's like, wow, what a way to live. On the way to freedom and empowerment, we develop such a strong sense of self that it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It doesn't matter what anybody judges us. And I speak from experience, by the way. I know self-doubt. My entire adolescence was one long depression with suicidal fantasies. I know self-hatred. And these days, no matter what happens, no matter the details in my life, the circumstances, whether a relationship works out or it doesn't, whether a project succeeds or it fails, in quotes, never, ever, ever do I question my sense of self. Like my level of self-love and self-acceptance are established and unshakable, no matter what happens in my life. And that is such an empowered way to live.
Wow, that's so cool. And if you're listening, I heard some really intense words there. And so, this is somebody that's been on the edge of life, been on the edge of why am I here? And has found ways to work through that. And, I don't know who's listening. I have no clue where everybody is in this, world listening right now. But I do know that our goal every week is to try and help small little course corrections, whether it's work on your breathing or helping you to feel more empowered. Whatever that is, that's why Christian's here. And that's why the Soulful Power group is here. So what do you do for somebody, if somebody's interested in wanting to learn more, what's the next step for them, in this journey?
One easy step is get the book. Okay. The book will change your life. The first quarter of the book is designed to help us understand how the mind works, how the ego mind works, and how we get stuck in its self-made prison of fear and lack and limitation and judgment and feeling like victim mindset, and all the other ways, all the other shenanigans that the ego mind does, so that we can let ourselves free from it. We're the only ones that can let ourselves out of that prison. Nobody else can. That's the self-made prison. And then I've designed the book in a very manageable way. I know how busy everybody is and how overscheduled our lives are. So I designed it with short chapters. It might take you 10 minutes, 15 minutes to read a chapter. Do one a week, but do the practices, right? Each chapter comes with practices that are designed to integrate the teachings into our lives and to apply them to our lives, so that they don't stay at the level of, wow, what a great idea, what great information. We don't need more information. We've got information overload. Yeah. What we need is transformation. And that comes from really living and taking on those teachings and applying them to our lives. Um, just buy the book and do a chapter a week. It'll change your life, guaranteed.
Wow.
And then if somebody wants to do deeper work with me, I do, virtual coaching. I do a year-long virtual coaching program. And I'm going to start restarting retreats again, weekend retreats again, hopefully later this year, depending on how things go.
Right. That's retreats, workshops, programs, coaching, trek sessions. I mean, there's a lot there on your website. So your suggestion then, Christian, is to get the book. Can we get it at Amazon? Is that?
You get it anywhere books are sold. If you want to support your local bookstore, do that. You just need to order it.
Awesome.
And it's definitely available on Amazon as well.
Perfect. And then get the book. And then from there, I think you'll start to have a better understanding of what the next steps are. And maybe the book is the extent for you, and maybe you take it to other levels. That's completely up to you as you feel, the need moving forward. So Christian, thank you so much for sharing this. It's a unique perspective. It's always fun to learn things. And, whether it's breathing or meditation, whether it's EQ, I mean, there's a variety of things that we learned today. And so what's the best place for people to reach out directly to you, Christian, if they want to learn more about this?
Thank you for asking that, Dave. I have my website, which is soulfulpower.com. From there, they can access my social media. And for any of your listeners who go to soulfulpower.com and get on my email list, and we all know how easy it is to click unsubscribe down the road if it doesn't work for you.
Sure.
But just by virtue of getting on my email list, we'll send them a sample chapter of the book that talks about what it means to live a heroic life in the 21st century. It'll give them some of these power practices that you were talking about. And we'll share with them a recorded teaching and guided meditation about trust, which I designed last year in the middle of the pandemic at one of the worst times, to help us get to that place of eye of the storm, right? So how do we move from this fearful, chaotic situation in the world into that place of center within ourselves, no matter what's going on in our life? Like, that is priceless to be able to do that.
Yeah, not like we don't need trust right now. Who trusts anybody? It's harder and harder to trust people around you and trust people that are leading you. So that's definitely a great word. And we didn't even get to talk about the hero part of your life. So we definitely want to bring you back and learn more about that. So thank you so much. And again, as I try to share every week for people that are listening, if this, resonated with you, rather than just jump into your next event, jump into your next podcast, whatever it is you're going to do next, you know what? If you're right now thinking this book would be good for you, then just jump and get a copy right now. Go to Amazon and click on Awakening the Soul of Power and get a copy and start that journey, because our goal is to help see you with little improvements every week, every month, every year. This might be one of the best things that you could do for yourself. If you do nothing and you move on about your day, that's totally fine. But you can't get mad at Christian and you can't get mad at me, because we did our best today to share with you some alternatives, some ideas on how to continue to empower you even more. And so if you fast forward your life 6 months from now and you're still worn out and you're still not where you want to be, then think back to today and jump and get a copy of this book. So Christian, thank you so much for investing the time. And I took a bunch of notes as always, so I have to go and look and see how I can work on this breathing piece. I'm excited to learn more from your website on that as well. So thank you again so much.
Thank you so much, Dave, for having me on the show. I enjoyed the conversation very much and the back and forth. And thank you for having the show to begin with, because I know that it does make a difference.
Absolutely. Thank you
in many,
so much.
many lives. And so one final request, if there's anybody still listening, to go on your website and like your podcast, give you a positive review on your podcast, so that help get the message out to even more people.
Thank you. I'm going to put that at the beginning. So we're going to put that right at the beginning so everybody hears it. No, thank you so much for that. And I got to listen to your TEDx talk too. I'm looking forward to that. So we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
I look forward to that. Thank you.